Hi, I'm Karen, and this is the Mental Health Hope You're Not Alone podcast. This space is all about breaking the stigma of mental health, where we'll share personal stories, helpful online resources, and meaningful insights, all with one goal in mind: to remind you that you are not alone in your mental health journey. Hello, hopefuls, and welcome back to the Mental Health Hope You're Not Alone podcast. I'm really happy that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about the different ways somebody would get anxiety, and then I'll go into a little bit of my story, and then we're also going to talk about two different ways to help with anxiety. And I specifically chose these because there are things that I'm going through right now. I do know that there are a lot of ways to help with anxiety, but these are the two that I'm trying. I want to just share the info, and hopefully people can better understand their anxiety and maybe these two options. So what we're going to be talking about is forgiveness for the person that caused your anxiety. And then also we're going to be talking about how exercise can help with anxiety. I say I'm doing pretty well with the exercise. The forgiveness, not so much. But hopefully over time that will get better. Let's talk about what anxiety disorder is. Anxiety disorder is a type of mental health condition that if you have anxiety, you may respond to certain things and situations with fear or dread. And you may have also experienced physical signs of anxiety, such as a pounding heart and sweating. And I can tell you, and if you've been keeping up with this podcast, you'll know that my physical symptoms are what got me to the doctor, and that was when I was diagnosed with anxiety. It goes on here to say it's normal to have some anxiety. You may feel anxious and nervous if you have to tackle a problem at work, go on an interview, take a test, make an important decision. Some anxiety can be beneficial. It can help us notice dangerous situations and focuses our attention so we stay safe. I do think I've had anxiety my whole life, but it wasn't until I was diagnosed with it that I really started looking back on it. I realized, oh my gosh, that was anxiety. It goes on to say here, but an anxiety disorder goes beyond the regular nervousness and slight fear you may feel from time to time. An anxiety disorder happens when anxiety interferes with your ability to function, which it has for me, for sure. Your reactions are often out of proportion to situations. Yes, I've done that a lot. It seems like, especially lately. And if you recall, in a previous episode, we talked about trauma response. And so that those two go together with the overreaction and the trauma response. I'll give you an example. I got really irritated at an employee, coworker that I work with, and it probably wasn't their fault, but my reaction to the situation was not appropriate based on what was occurring. It was a situation that I've been in before, and is part of the reason that I deal with anxiety. And so when I found myself in that same situation, I probably overreacted because I have dealt with that before, and it was very triggering to me and my anxiety. It's hard to where you don't have a reaction. One of the things, going off on a tangent here, but one of the things I'm working on is practicing the pause. So, for example, if I'm in a conversation with somebody and it's triggering my anxiety, or if it's not going in the way it should, I practice the pause by maybe discontinuing the conversation and picking up on it later, or thinking before I speak, which I tend to just not do that. And then other things like email. If you have to write an email that, if you're upset when you're writing this email, it's best to write the email, not send it, and then the following day go back to that email and look to see if what you've written is appropriate. We're talking about overreactions, and the last thing in here, it says you can't control your responses to situations. And again, very similar to that. I just exploded on a coworker. This same coworker has caused issues for me. And so while I'm sorry that happened, I'm not sorry that it happened in a way that because it was a trauma response. That makes sense. But anyway, so types of anxiety disorders, which is general anxiety disorder, and that's one of the things I have. Agoraphobia, that's another thing that I have. Panic disorder, I have occasional panic attacks. It's been a while. I was near having one a couple of months ago and was able to calmly get myself out of it, which is probably the first time I've ever done that. This is just for me, but it felt very much like a mind over matter situation. I may not always be successful. Anyway, specific phobias, and it talks about just different phobias and how they disrupt your life. Social anxiety disorder. I have not been diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, but I really think that I have it. Now, the reason I say that is because all the time, when going into the office, it takes me 2 hours to mentally prepare myself to get into the office. And it didn't always used to be that way, but things have triggered my anxiety to where that is where it is right now. It talks about separation anxiety, which I actually think I had a little bit when I was younger. I remember one time specifically that my parents were going off to do something with a couple that they were really good friends with, and they left me at their house with a sitter. I just remember getting there thinking that I was fine until I got there, and then I got really nervous and sick and didn't want them to leave, which I don't remember what happened after that. I just remember sitting in the car outside their house, not feeling well because of the anxiety. And the other thing here is selective mutism. This condition happens when you don't talk in certain situations because of fear of anxiety. It usually affects young children, but it can also affect adolescents and adults. Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about symptoms of anxiety. And this is just the symptoms of the anxiety, not including physical. So feeling of panic, fear, dread, and uneasiness, feeling on edge or irritable, which, yes, that for me for sure. Uncontrollable obsessive thoughts, yes, I do that, and it seems like it's always at night, and then I can't sleep. And then difficulty concentrating, I can tell you, yes, that is absolutely true. I'll just say yesterday was a really good example. I had something that happened at work, and I may go into a little detail during this episode. After this thing happened, I had a really hard time concentrating. And I've said this before in other episodes that if you factor in not being able to concentrate due to anxiety, and then I also have a disability with respect to being dyslexic that also causes problems with concentration. And then, of course, now I'm in my 50s. I have some problems with being able to concentrate due to menopause. So you factor all that in, you can see it's going to be hard to concentrate. So it talks here about physical symptoms, and they may include restlessness, which I agree with that. There are times where I can't sit still, or if I'm laying in bed, I have to move around a lot. If my anxiety is really high, I actually have to get up and start pacing back and forth because I just feel like I'm going to crawl out of my skin. It's just a very uncomfortable, uneasy feeling. Heart palpitations. Yes, I do have heart palpitations. I will say, though, that up until yesterday, I had not had many palpitations, and I think it was because my anxiety was at a comfortable level to where I was able to live with. I'm hoping that doesn't continue, but the problem isn't resolved yet, so I suspect that it will happen again. The list goes on here and says shortness of breath, muscle tension. That tends to happen if I'm really anxious. I notice that my shoulders tend to go up around my ears, and just recently I called in with a migraine because it felt like I slept with my shoulders around my ears, and my whole shoulders, neck, and head were all just really uncomfortable and very sore and tense. And I think that was what was causing the migraine. And I'll say this too. I've said this in most every episode that when I talk about this, but when I say migraine, I don't mean a diagnosed migraine. I mean it's my version of an anxiety-induced migraine. And the way I tend to get over those is just by finding a way to relax my anxiety, whether it be medication, taking a nap, things like that. So cold and sweaty hands, I don't really have that, but I'm sure others do. Dry mouth, nausea, yes, I definitely have nausea. That was the symptom that got me into the doctor, so for sure with that one. And then numbness or tingling in your hands or feet, which I did have this. So in 2002, I had my first real panic attack, and it was the weirdest thing ever because I had never experienced it before. And I was actually driving home from a friend's house after we had partied all night, and I was extremely hungover. I just was not feeling well. I mixed beer and hard liquor, and that was a no-no. What is it? They say beer before liquor, never sicker, something like that. That's what I had done. I had beer first, and then I had hard liquor, and that was a mistake. Anyway, I was driving home, was really wanting to get home, and I was about 2 hours away from home. I remembered that when I was driving home, the lanes on the highway narrowed down to one because there was a lot of construction, and it was several miles of construction. I don't remember how many, but I know it was a lot. I want to say close to 20, but it was a lot. Which, of course, that caused my anxiety to get high because I really wanted to get home. I was really uncomfortable. I was really sick. I felt awful. And I should have stayed at my friend's house and just crashed there. But anyway, on my way home, things started to go numb. I couldn't feel my foot pressing on the gas. My face was numb, so I kept checking the mirror to see if my face was still there because I couldn't feel it. It was the most bizarre thing. And then I got to a certain point on my trip home, and I called my dad and said that I was going to stop at a hospital on my way home. I said it like I'm at a convenience store. I'm going to stop at a hospital on my way home. What ended up happening, this is embarrassing to admit, but what ended up happening is I threw up in the parking lot of the hospital, and it instantly made me feel better. And at the time, the hospital was about 45 minutes to an hour away from my parents' house, because I was actually living out of town then, and I was in town staying with my parents. But anyway, throwing up made me feel better. But I'll never forget it. And since then, I've had a few. Now I know what it is. I can feel it coming on. This one I had, or almost had a few weeks ago, I felt it coming on and was trying to get myself out of it, which it worked because I was actually in an Uber when this happened. And because of that, the Uber driver was very talkative, which was fine. And I was concerned about having a panic attack in front of him, but he was also having a conversation with me about various things, and that conversation helped get me out of the feeling of almost having an anxiety attack. I could start feeling my body going numb, and I could feel that my stomach was upset, and I managed to get myself out of it. It goes on to talk about what causes anxiety, and so that's really what we want to talk about. And for me, my anxiety is caused by, I think it's very much PTSD and anxiety just in general, but is interactions with people at work who were bullying me. We always had a really poor interaction together. So anytime I work with somebody who kind of mimics that bullying and that behavior, it triggers me in a really big way to where my anxiety is really high, to where I feel nauseous. I've called in sick because of it. I took FMLA because of it. When all that occurred, it started in 2020 and has progressed over time to where now I'm diagnosed with agoraphobia. And if you remember in other episodes, we talked about how the more my anxiety increased, the smaller my world got, and that I could not close the anxiety loop. And I think that's what it's called. And what that means is you are at a level that's comfortable with your anxiety, and you see a threat, you conquer that threat, and then you're able to get yourself back to the normal level of anxiety. Whereas if you don't conquer that threat, then it tends to increase your anxiety. So, for example, I was diagnosed with anxiety because I wasn't able to conquer the threat or the bullying. And so my anxiety and PTSD and depression, that's what all that was diagnosed. And then over time, what I thought was trying to help my anxiety by only going in 2 days a week to work, eventually then 100% working from home. And what I found out though by doing those things, that I thought I was helping protect myself, but I found out that what I was really doing is avoiding. And there was an episode that we did a while back that we talked about avoidance. And so I highly recommend you check that out. It was a really good episode. I learned if you don't close that anxiety, your anxiety gets higher and higher. And I do believe that's now why I have been diagnosed with agoraphobia. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about my exercise. Let's move on. So how can anxiety be diagnosed? It says there's a physical exam. You can go to your provider and talk to them about your symptoms, including how intense they are and how long they last, and discussing on how the symptoms interfere with your daily life. Management and treatment is antidepressants, benzodiazepine, which is an anxiety and panic medication, and then beta blockers. And so what I'm actually on for my anxiety is propranolol. I want to preface this by saying I'm not pushing medications. Everybody is different with how they manage their anxiety, but for me, I was put on propranolol and have increased the amount over time. And even when my anxiety is really high, I may double it myself to try and get my anxiety lower or to knock it down. Because when I am really anxious, it's not exhausting when it happens, but when I come down from it, then I'm really exhausted. It's like you're just in that heightened state of fight or flight. I get really tired after being really anxious. So that's one of the things I'm on. And the other thing that I'm on is Wellbutrin. I just started that about a month or two ago now, and I think it's helping. Then the other thing is just going to a counselor or psychotherapy for anxiety. And I've been working with somebody now for a year. I've had other counselors that I've worked with. I had 2 in my last location where I lived. And one, I only had 2 appointments with one of them, then she retired. And so I found somebody else who I really liked, and then I ended up moving to my current location, and I found the current person that I speak with. We talk every other week, and so it's been really great. How she deals with it is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, which basically means that you are putting yourself in situations that cause anxiety, and you're basically exposed to that. And then if you get through that by conquering that trigger, then you close the anxiety loop. And then eventually, over time, if you continue to conquer that, whatever it is, eventually it should lower your anxiety to where you can interact with that problem, whatever it is that caused your anxiety. The last thing here, it says the outlook and prognosis. What is the prognosis for a person with anxiety disorders? Difficulty with social situations and decreased quality of life, which that's absolutely true with me. And substance use disorders, including alcohol use. And we actually just talked about this in an episode. It was with respect to depression. But we interviewed somebody who, with their depression, they were also abusing drugs, legal drugs. And then we talked about my story, which was trying to fill a void with shopping. And I still have that as a problem, but it's not as bad as it used to be. Let's talk about how to live with anxiety. It says, how can I take care of myself if I have anxiety disorder? Stress management. That's what I thought I was doing with anxiety and not going into work, and then it really ended up being avoidance. But I do agree with this stress management. Being at home, whether it's avoidance or not, certainly lowers my anxiety. I've been doing it for quite a while now, that it's helped get me to a comfortable level. But that all changed yesterday, and we'll go into that too here in a little bit. Support groups, and that's one of the things I do want to do. There is a support group. If you look at, it's called National Alliance of Mental Health, and it's a great website that you can go to and you can learn more about just mental health in general. But they actually have support groups. that you can go to. You can find one in your local area. And so I've been considering doing this after work, going to one of their support groups, and I haven't done it yet. One of the things that my counselor and I have talked about is if having anxiety and trying to introduce new things to help the anxiety, it's best to stack them over time versus all at once because you don't want to feel overwhelmed. So it goes on here, support groups, education, which this whole podcast is about education. If it helps just one person, then I'm all for that. Okay, and then here it says limiting or avoiding caffeine. I don't drink caffeine. I haven't for years. And so that's not something that will bother. So that was the article. This was from Cleveland Clinic, and it's a really good overview of anxiety. Next up, we're going to talk about different ways that people have anxiety. What in their life caused them to have anxiety? My anxiety comes from work. I was, in my opinion, targeted and bullied by one person. What's the word I'm looking for? By proxy. I was targeted and bullied by proxy through other people, in my opinion. And it has led me on this road that has been absolutely miserable. I was originally diagnosed in 2020. Here we are in 2026, and I'm still dealing with it to the point now where it's gotten so bad that I have requested 100% telework. And I have been teleworking 100% of the time since September of last year. And it has helped. But the fear of having to go back into work, which I know in exposure therapy, that's probably a good idea, but I'm just not ready for that. I'm not mentally prepared to do that yet. I believe I was targeted and bullied, and it just made a hostile work environment. It was absolutely awful. The depression and anxiety started in 2020. It is increased over time. I did take FMLA in 2022 or 23. And that was because my anxiety and depression was just so awful at such a heightened state. Anxiety was high, depression was low. That the only thing I could do was not go into work. And it didn't quite work going on FMLA for 3 months because I knew at some point I was going to have to return to the office that was causing me anxiety. And if you recall in other episodes that we've talked about, what triggered my anxiety is I felt like I had to be absolutely perfect. I could not do anything wrong. And so trying to maintain perfection absolutely killed me to the point where my anxiety and depression got to a point where I just couldn't deal with it anymore and went on FMLA. If you're not familiar with FMLA, it is Family Medical Leave Act, which gives a person the right to take 3 months off and your position will be kept during the time that you're gone. And you don't have to use the 3 months all at once. You can do it periodically over time, but it cannot exceed the 3 months mark. And you can only do FMLA once a year. It's not a calendar year, it's a rotating year. So let's say I started FMLA in June through August. I wouldn't be able to do it again until September, I believe. Anyway, so that's my story, is that I feel like I was targeted and bullied. It led to a hostile work environment. While it was initial relief within the first couple of weeks, the anxiety and depression continued during that whole time. And so because of that, I still throw this around all the time, is that I'm considering retiring on a disability, because if I go on FMLA, let's say, I'll have to go back to that environment. And that's not going to do me any good. So that's my trigger with anxiety. Because of how I was treated, when I meet somebody that has those same characteristics or may act or mimic how those people were and how they treated me, then it triggers my PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. I don't want to get into all the details, but I had an interaction with somebody, and that interaction mimicked other interactions with people to where it somewhat feels like it's a hostile work environment. When I do interact with somebody, it puts me into a tailspin. A list of things that cause anxiety And so other things are genetics and family history. Anxiety can run in biological families. You may be at high risk if a parent or sibling has an anxiety disorder. Life experiences and trauma, that is for me. I did experience trauma with this person. Significant life events, especially during childhood, can trigger lasting anxiety, includes abuse, neglect, bereavement, a loss of a loved one, bullying, that's what I just said, or social discrimination. I think some of it could have been discrimination. When I told them I had a disability of being dyslexic, things changed after that. I felt like I just could not meet their expectations. I felt like I had to be perfect. No matter what I did, it was always wrong. And because of all that, it just led to really awful anxiety and depression. It's very much a roller coaster. Some days I'm doing great, some days I'm not. But anyway, so ongoing stress buildup, a single major event, or a buildup of smaller stressors. That was mine because it was over a period of time. Work pressure, ding ding, that's my thing. Financial strain or relationship issues can eventually push someone into a state of chronic anxiety. Medical conditions can also cause problems. I have heard of medical anxiety. I don't particularly deal with that, but it can cause problems for others. And substances and medications, certain substances can trigger or worsen symptoms like caffeine, drug and alcohol, which we just talked about in the last episode where we interviewed somebody who was dealing with their drug addiction. They're not, let me rephrase that. They are now sober, but they were at some point addicted to legal drugs. So now let's talk about what my career coach and I have talked about. It was a very brief conversation, but it made me think. And because he's talked to me about this person or persons that have caused the anxiety with respect to feeling like I was being targeted and bullied. He basically said, look at it, not necessarily from their perspective, but look at it in a way of, if this person that caused this, how did they get to the point where they felt it was okay to treat somebody that way? And I would target somebody. So I don't quite understand how somebody could do that, but that's exactly how it felt. He was basically trying to get me to understand their side, like what has happened to this person that they feel or they think that this is a way to treat somebody. And he says if you look at it and change the dialogue in your head about this person, like for me, I'm like, I hate this person, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. Maybe try and think about it the other way from the person's perspective. What has happened to that person to where they feel that's the right way to treat somebody? And he says if you start thinking about that and you change the dialogue in your head, then there may be a way to forgive them. And this is where I struggle. I am really good at holding grudges. Always have been. I try not to. As I've gotten older, I tend to try and not do that. But when I was younger, it was bad. Back to the forgiveness, he mentioned that there is what's called a forgiveness spectrum. It can change from day to day. You may be 80% forgiveness. Next day, you may be 0%. And then that will continue. Let's talk about that forgiveness spectrum. It goes from 0 to 100%. You forgive them to absolutely not forgive them. The forgiveness spectrum for someone who caused trauma is a personal, non-linear journey ranging from total resentment to not letting go. So it would be 100% to letting go, which would be 0%. Often focusing on releasing oneself from pain rather than excusing the offender. And that's why they always say that forgiveness is not for the person that's caused the problem or the trauma. The forgiveness is for you, or me in this case. That if I can forgive somebody, then it's going to be helpful for me down the road. It involves managing intense emotions, setting boundaries, and deciding if or how to reconcile. And this is where I really struggle. Because my most recent experience that triggered my anxiety and PTSD happened yesterday. And I don't know how to set boundaries with this person. it's dependent on the relationship that we have to have at work. Let's say that. And I don't know how to reconcile that. I don't know how to mend the relationship because this person is who they are and they're not going to change for me. And I am who I am. I'm the one that's been going through this anxiety and being triggered by this person. And so I'm not quite sure how to look at this in a way of forgiveness because I still have to interact with this person, which still triggers my anxiety. So you can see it's just this loop that I'm in. And the other thing is diminishing the severity of the trauma. It says managing intense emotions, setting boundaries, and deciding if or how to reconcile, often without forgetting or diminishing the severity of the trauma. So acknowledge that the trauma happened, but find a way to forgive the person. And I have not been able to do that. I've not been able to forgive the people that caused the initial anxiety and with being targeted and bullied. But I think what's been helpful is the fact that it's now 2026. When this started, it was 2020. And over time, it's not playing a huge role in my life in the sense that I don't have to interact with them anymore, but I am dealing with the consequences, like the anxiety and depression. The spectrum might look something like this. This is a conceptual framework. It says 0 forgiveness, active resentment, which I'm there on some days and other days I'm not, which that's the whole reason for the spectrum. But it says the victim is consumed by anger, pain, and desire or justice or revenge. This is a natural starting point after the trauma. And I will say that when all of this first happened, I did feel consumed by the anger, for sure. No question about that. And of course, then the pain and then the anger, for sure. No question about that. But then the anxiety followed and then depression and so on and so forth. So acknowledgement and processing, so moving away from denial to acknowledging the trauma and the predator's actions, which I have multiple times because of just telling the story. Every time I tell a story, I feel like I'm acknowledging what happened. And it's exhausting having to tell the story over and over again because every time I tell it, I feel like I have to relive it, which is just really exhausting. And then releasing resentment, the victim begins to detach their peace from the offender's actions, recognizing that holding on to anger harms them more. This is not letting the offender off the hook, but freeing oneself of the emotional prison. And that's exactly how I feel. I do feel like I'm in prison because we've talked about that, right? Over time, as my anxiety has gotten worse because I've not been able to close the anxiety loop, that my world has gotten smaller, so it really feels in a way like a prison because I'm confined to my 4 walls, and that is where the agoraphobia diagnosis came from. Next here is understanding and empathy. That was the one thing that my career coach was talking about, was empathy, because he was like, think about this in a way that, again, like I just said, what in this person's life happened to where they felt it was okay to treat somebody like that. And one way to do that is maybe being empathetic to their situation. If you can be empathetic to their situation, then maybe that will help with the forgiveness. I struggle with that. I do have empathy for some people, but it's hard to do that for somebody that has treated me disrespectfully. It says understanding the context or brokenness of the perpetrator without justifying the actions. This step is not required for healing, which I disagree. My career coach feels this is very much something, because basically it's like you understanding the other person and being in their shoes for a while and trying to understand their position. The very last thing here is letting go and forgiveness. The final, often fluid state where power of the event to cause daily distress is broken. You're basically forgiving them, which I honestly think I probably will not be able to do that until I get out of work, whether it be through retirement or maybe no interaction with this person ever again, that will I will be able to heal. And now that I have to interact with this person at work, probably more frequently than I would like, it just causes a lot of problems. So anyway, key aspects of the spectrum, it's non-linear in nature, and that's exactly what my career coach has talked about, that some days you could be at 20%, other days you may be at 80%, next day after that 100%. It's going to be changing all the time. And it says individuals may move back and forth between these stages, experiencing moments of peace followed by intense anger and grief. There are times where I feel really great, and I won't say I'm forgiving somebody, but then I start to think about it, and I tend to not forgive them when I think about it. So it's definitely very non-linear with respect to how it works. Unilateral versus transactional forgiveness. Forgiveness can be unilateral, given without an apology or repentance, or transactional, dependent on the perpetrator's change. And I would love nothing more than to get an apology from somebody that treated me that way and caused a hostile work environment. I would love it. I would love to be able to talk to them about it. But I did actually try and talk to them about it years ago when all this started. And they refused talking to me about it. So I never got that moment, which was really unfortunate. It might have helped. I don't know. Or made things worse. I don't know. And I think that's where I struggle, because I really would like to be able to talk with them, and I just will never be able to do that. And I think it would help that I got closure. And maybe the forgiveness is that closure. I don't know. It's going to be hard to forgive somebody. That's for sure. Boundary setting. On this spectrum, forgiving does not mean enabling. Setting firm boundaries is crucial, especially in cases of abuse. And I feel that way. I'm not abused in the sense of the word where it's a relationship with somebody, like with respect to like a romantic relationship, but it is a relationship. And if I wanted to create those boundaries, I don't know what they would be, because I think I will have to continually work with this person, and I don't know what boundaries I could create to make things better. And the only one that I think that makes sense is no interaction whatsoever. I don't like drama. If there's something going on, I will remove myself from the drama. And this very much feels that way. I just don't want any part of it. But because I have to interact with this person, it will continually cause anxiety, it will continually cause problems with my PTSD. And that's hard to overcome when constantly interacting with this person. There's not an opportunity to heal from it or forgive them. Not excusing forgiveness does not mean the behavior was acceptable, nor does it require forgetting or reconciling. Navigating the spectrum, name the pain, whether it be hurt, anger, or betrayal. Define the boundaries, determine what safety looks like, including limiting or ending contact, I think would be the best option. Or maybe retiring on a disability. Get out of this entirely. And then process the trauma. Seek counseling or support to process the trauma, as forgiveness is not a substitute for therapy. So basically do both. We're trying to do both. Let's move on to one of the things that I have recently started doing, which was exercising. If you've been following along, you know that I am an athlete. I may not look like an athlete, but I am one. I swam competitively for 10 years. I swam all 4 years in high school. I lettered 2 years, and it was great. I loved it. I quote unquote retired after my senior year. I didn't want to go on a scholarship somewhere because I had burnout. That was in high school. But since then, in 2000, I started running, which was a really good thing for me and something I never thought I was going to be able to do because I have asthma. I never thought I would be able to run. And then I was introduced to the Couch to 5K program, which it does work. I think it's a 9-week program where you build up your stamina for running. And it was great. I loved it. It was very much a relaxing thing for me that I could go out and do a run. If things were just awful with whatever reason, I could go out on a 3-mile run, and by the time I got back, it was like all the problems were gone. I loved it. Loved it so much. And I do think that some of my depression comes in because I don't know if I'll ever be able to run again. And not being able to do something you love, it broke me. But anyway, so I became a runner in 2010, and one of my friends from high school saw that I was running and said, "Hey, you're a swimmer, you're a runner, why don't you go get a bike and become a triathlete?" And I was like, all right, why not? So I did. I went out and got a cheap bike, and my first triathlon was in 2012. I was very active after that. I started doing a lot of road races. I did a couple of triathlons a year. I was doing group rides where we would get together, be, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us or more, and we'd get together and do a organized group ride. What I mean by that is that the course is already chosen, and then you just go with your friends, and it was a lot of fun. My longest ride ever was 54 miles, and it was, I don't know, June or August, or it was over the summer. And thankfully, that summer, for whatever reason, wasn't really humid. And so we were able to do it. But good golly, by the time we were done, I had to go to work after that. That was really great. And I was really active. I was working out 6 to 8 times a week, especially when I was training for a triathlon. I quite often would do a run in the morning and swim in the evening because I was on a swim team. And I would swim on the weekends because that's when my swim team met and so on. It was awesome. I freaking loved it. I loved it. And then I started experiencing some problems with my left ankle. I don't remember now what the problem was, but what it felt like was that my bones in my ankle were rubbing against each other. I did eventually go in for surgery, and what they ended up doing was they drilled holes into the bone, which was supposed to help with cartilage growth, but it didn't. And then I went to another physician after that, and he tried to. I actually got a cadaver bone put in, and I think that was a part of a way to help with cartilage growth or something like that. And it was working for a while, and I'll never forget it. I don't know what happened, but I was climbing up a ladder to put up blinds, and whatever I did getting up that ladder, I felt something happen in my ankle, and I was not able to run after that because I was starting to run again. And I did do a 5K in 2020, 21. I don't remember. No, it could have been 2021. It could have been. So I did a run 5K in 2020, and then I did another 5K by walking in the rain with my dog in 2021 or 22. And that was fun. She probably didn't like it, but I thought it was fun. But anyway, and then 2 years ago, I fell on ice and I broke my leg. I broke both bones in my lower leg near the ankle. I broke my ankle, and I also broke some bones in my foot. I really did a number on it. Had to have surgery, and I was 3 months non-weight bearing. And so I have all kinds of pins and things inside my ankle holding everything together. I would love to be able to run, but I don't know if I'll be able to. And so that was part of the depression too, I think. Yeah, all the anxiety and things, whatever that was going on, that was not great. But not being able to do something that I absolutely loved was really heartbreaking to me and just exacerbated the depression. So I then started doing some new medication, like I mentioned earlier. The Wellbutrin is what I'm on, and it's supposed to help you with energy and motivation. I think it is working. And about a month or two ago, I put in a request at Club Pilates to do a free session because I still wanted a good workout and I still want to benefit from the workout. But because of all the things I've had wrong with my ankles and so on, that I needed something that was low impact. And so I went to this Pilates session that was free. And I'll tell you what, to be quite honest, because of all the anxiety and depression, one of the things that I tend to do is eat my feelings. And when I'm upset, I tend to not go for things that are good for me. And especially with respect to sweets. Cinnamon rolls are a weakness. Cookies are a weakness. Just things like that. Eating out and not cooking and so on. So over the last 6 years, I've gained a significant amount of weight. And so that was also something. I was like, this is the heaviest I've ever been. I didn't know how I was going to get away from that and do a workout because I don't have the body that I used to in 2012. And so I just didn't know how I was going to do it. That's why I researched Pilates, and I found this Club Pilates not far from me. Went for the free 30-minute session and absolutely loved it. She kicked my ass. I was the only one there. And so I had one-on-one attention with the instructor, and it was great. It was absolutely great. It helped with stretching, ab work, upper body strength, lower body strength. It helped my ankles because my ankles are so weak now that even walking upstairs can be difficult. So because of that and how much I loved it, I got a membership, 3-month membership, and that I was allowed to go 2 times a week, and you could go 8 times a month. But it's not a month meaning 1st through the 30th or 31st. It's a month meaning if you buy your package on 15th, you can do 8 sessions between that time and the month later on the 15th of the following month. So I had all my courses, sessions picked out, and unfortunately I was on a wait list and I didn't get into the class. And then the other thing was the instructor didn't show up. So I had 2 classes that I had to make up in that month. So last week, actually, where I did 3 sessions, and I loved it. And so what I ended up doing is I had a question about what I was doing in the session and the classes and things, because I'm going to be going out of town here sometime relatively soon. And where I'm headed have a Club Pilates. And so I'll get the opportunity to go to their classes, which I'm really excited about. But anyway, so I called to ask about that and a few other things. And I was telling her how much I enjoyed the classes and that I think I'd like to increase my membership. And so she went over the membership if I did increase it. And so I did increase it. It's unlimited. I can go as often as I want in a month. And so my month is actually from the 6th through the 6th because that's when my membership increased. And so now I'm going 3 days a week. And this week I'm going Monday, Wednesday, Thursday in the morning. Love to go in the morning. First class, 5:30 in the morning on Monday. And I just did that this last weekend, and I had the same instructor as I did in the first session, and I was the only one that showed up at 5:30. I was the only one in the class, which just shocked me because I live in a really highly populated area. I just was shocked that they had a class available at 5:30, but she ended up saying, the instructor said, I don't know why anybody signed up for a 5:30 class. And I was like, then if you don't want a 5:30 class, then don't offer it. But anyway, so it was a really good session. It was a one-on-one session because I was the only one there. And so I'm really loving it. I love it so much. And to the point where I'm actually considering getting the reformer, which reformer is equipment that you lay on versus doing Pilates on a mat. I'm actually considering getting a reformer at my house. And I haven't decided that yet because they're not cheap. And but I really like to be able to do that. Be able to maybe for whatever reason have the opportunity to do that at home. Anyway, all of that to say is that the exercise that I've been doing with the Pilates has really helped me. I walk out of there feeling like $1,000,000. I'm actually finding something that I love with respect to being able to work out. It's not running, but it does give me something to enjoy. And that has really changed the way things have been for me lately, in a sense that I find that I am happier, that my anxiety and depression is at a level that I can maintain, or at least work with, if you will. But I worry about having to go into work, because the days that I would have to go into work, I would not be able to do a Pilates class. And so that was concerning for my counselor, because she felt that my recovery is really important, and being able to go do the Pilates class as part of the recovery is really important. She's hesitant in having me go into work even 2 days, because now that I have unlimited, I can go every day this week if I wanted, which I'm not going to. It's not now anyways. But certainly in the future, I would consider it. But anyway, so the exercise has really done a positive thing for me. And I noticed changes in me both physically and mentally since I started. And so physically, I've been able to walk up the stairs better. I feel that like the strength in my body just in general is better because I am overweight and I carry my weight in my belly. That standing has been very difficult over the last several months because I've gained so much weight. And I just noticed today that when I was standing making my lunch, because I actually made something over the oven, and when I was standing and making lunch, that my back wasn't bothering me. The physical aspects of it are, I can really I can tell that there are things changing with me physically, but mentally I can tell things are helping and changing. And for example, when I missed the class where the instructor didn't show up, I ended up going and walking on a trail and where there were beautiful flowers and trees, and it was by a lake, and it was really gorgeous. And I just felt really, I don't know, light and just incredible during that time and walking around. And so I kept thinking, I'm like, I want to do this more. I want to go places and go hiking, which, by the way, that's how I broke my leg, because I was out hiking, which I think we talked about that. But I want to go hiking. I want to find places that I can go and have that same calmness, because I absolutely felt amazing when I was walking through there. And I sat on a bench for a while and just enjoyed the scenery. It was amazing. So there is a garden near me, not far. I'm going to try and go there. I don't know when, but I'm hoping here, maybe this week if I can. Because I just don't want to lose the momentum I've got going with respect to the exercise. Because I know now that I need it. I knew I needed it, but the depression and everything overtook that. I've been going to Pilates 3 days a week. Last week was the first week that I went 3 days. And then, like I said, I've been feeling really great. Like, I've been wanting to actually get out and do things. And I haven't really had that feeling in a long time. I actually started feeling quote unquote normal. I don't feel normal, but I feel like I'm on the path to healing. And then yesterday happened, where I had this interaction with this person who triggered my PTSD because she mimics the behavior of others that I've had interactions with that caused the anxiety. And so now my anxiety is really high, my depression is really low. I have no desire to even go to work on Monday, but I know I'm going to go do the Pilates class. I have to do the Pilates class because I know it is beneficial to me, both physically and mentally. So I have to do it. And also I'm paying for it. I'm not going to not go. And so I'm really worried about how this is going to affect me moving forward, because I feel like I've actually made progress over the last few weeks, and then now this is back to where it was before I even started working out. All of that to say is we're going to talk about exercise and what specifically it can do with helping somebody through anxiety. And like I said, it's helping me because it makes me feel like I can actually be active. It helps reduce my anxiety a little bit, and it just feels like it's helping me down the path of healing. This is an article from the Harvard Health Publishing, or Harvard Medical School, and it says, how does exercise help ease anxiety? Engaging in exercise diverts you from the very thing you are anxious about, which I will say that. When I'm there at Pilates class, I'm not thinking about my anxiety or depression. I'm thinking about the workout and what she's having us do. And so I think that's also why I love it, because it gives me a break. It gives me a mental break. It gives my anxiety a break. And it's been really helpful. But anyway, it goes on here to say that moving your body decreases muscle tension, lowering the body's contribution to feeling anxious. Getting your heart rate up changes your brain chemistry, increasing the availability of important anti-anxiety neurochemicals, including serotonin, aminobutyric acid. I don't know how you pronounce that, but it's GABA, brain-derived neurotrophic factor BDNF, and endocannabinoids. I don't know how to pronounce all those, but I will link in the description and you can figure it out. Anyway, exercise activates frontal regions of the brain responsible for executive function, which helps control the amygdala, our reacting system to real and imagined threats to our survival. And if you remember, if you've been following along, we did talk about this back in a session way back when about trauma response, and it mentioned the amygdala. But anyway, exercising regularly builds up resources that bolster resilience against stormy emotions. To maximize the benefits, choose something that you enjoy. And I will say this, I have done Pilates. It's been a long time, like 20 years. And I have a friend who also suffers with anxiety, and she has been exercising. We'll just say that. I don't want to say what kind of exercise because I don't want to reveal her identity. Not that it would, but I want to be very cautious about that. But anyway, she goes out and does things on the weekends for exercise, and watching her and seeing how much she enjoys it really inspired me to find something that I thought I could do, and that's when I found Pilates. And it's everything that I hoped it would be. Work toward getting your heart rate up, which yes, so Pilates certainly gets my heart rate up, but I do think I need some kind of cardio. So I'm also considering buying an elliptical because I can't run, but at least with an elliptical, it kind of mimics running. So I'm hoping to maybe get that. Again, it's expensive, so I don't know exactly everything I'm going to want to purchase. But anyway, so work out with a friend or in a group to reap the added benefit of social support. And I agree with that. So now that I'm going every week, there's people that go to these same classes that I'm seeing, and I recognize them. We've had conversations. I just had a conversation with one lady about how she's injured, and that's why she's there. And so there's definitely that social interaction that I appreciate. And I'm hoping that those relationships grow, because I would love to maybe, I say go to coffee. I don't drink coffee, but maybe go to Starbucks and I could get a pastry and a chocolate milk or something. I don't know. But being able to have that interaction with somebody. Then it says, if possible, exercise in nature or green space. And that's why I want to go to this garden that's not far from me, because I want to be able to experience everything there that I experienced at this other garden or other trail. And so I'm hoping that will help. Okay, this is the article that discusses depression, anxiety, and exercise eases symptoms. And I've always known that. People forever have told me, go exercise, go for a walk. And that was even a struggle to get myself out of the house, to take my dog on a walk. I just had no desire to do it. And I spent a lot of time in bed, which is probably part of the reason too, where I didn't want to get out of bed. Did not have any desire whatsoever to get out of bed. And I'm feeling the effects of that now when I go to my Pilates class, because she had us do something Thursday that required a lot of balance, and I struggled with it. A very simple move, and I struggled with it. And I'm, of course, hoping over time it gets better, which I know it will. It always does when you exercise, but yeah, it's just, this whole experience has been interesting, trying to get back to healthy after not being healthy for many years. But anyway, so it says, we kind of talked about this too, but how does exercise help depression and anxiety? Regular exercise may help ease depression and anxiety by releasing feel-good endorphins. Endorphins are natural brain chemicals that can improve your sense of well-being. Taking your mind off your worries, which we kind of just talked about that. Like I said, when I'm there, that's all I think about. I don't think about anything else that's going on, which is really great. Kind of gives me that mental break. And then other things here, and this is one too. Regular exercise has many mental health and emotional benefits. It can help you gain confidence. And I can tell you for a fact that is true. Before yesterday, I felt like $1,000,000. I had a conversation with my counselor And she asked me how I was going to interact with this person because she knew it was coming up because it was a scheduled meeting. Well, she's, how are you going to handle this? And I said, well, I have things written down on things I want to say, kind of like talking points for the conversation. And the other thing that I have is that I feel more confident. And bullies tend to prey on those who are weak. And I felt like if I had confidence, then she wouldn't bully me. And I don't know if it helps or not, the confidence, but I did feel like I was able to stand up for myself in a way. Probably didn't help the relationship in any way. And so my confidence I feel today is certainly a lot less. My anxiety's higher, my depression's lower. But I'm hoping that I'm going back to Pilates next week. And I'm hoping that helps. But anyway, so it says here gaining confidence, meeting exercise goals or challenges, even small ones, can boost your self-confidence. Getting in shape also can make you feel better about how you look. And I will say, I know I'm fat. There's no question. I know I'm fat. And I don't like to look at myself in the mirror. And I don't put forth the effort that I used to. And also, too, I can't wear the things that I love, like heels, because of my ankles. And so that really affected how I felt about myself. But I will say that this confidence that I have is that I'm hoping that I can continue to have the confidence to help moving forward, because I am doing things. I'm going to this class and I did a 30-second plank. For somebody who has zero abs, being able to do a 30-second plank is hard. It's probably hard even with somebody who has that, who has abs. I just basically, when I go into a plank and hold it, I just get into the zone. I will be in my plank position and I will close my eyes and just get through that 30 seconds. So we did 2 planks and I did 2 30 seconds. And I'll tell you what, the second one was even harder. And I will say too, my body was not ready for back-to-back Pilates classes because I hadn't given my body time to recover from the workout the day before. And so I was still really tired and I was able to do 2 30-second planks. Yay me. Pat myself on the back. Next up here talks about your social interaction, which is true. We just talked about that and the people that I met. And I'm coping in a healthy way. I will say too, another thing that I've been doing is, as of, oh gosh, I can't remember, maybe 3 weeks ago now, has caused me to focus on my health. I started tracking my food. Because what I want to be able to do, and I don't know if Pilates is going to be the answer for me with respect to losing weight, but what I want to do is to eat right and eat within the boundaries that are healthy. And so I've been tracking my food and having 1,800 calories a day, which is pretty high for diet. 12 to 1,500 is pretty good. But I just think that's not enough. And so I have been tracking that in an app. And it also is triggering me to, when I don't go to the store, I was going to say when I go to the store because I have everything delivered. But when I get groceries delivered, for the last 2 times I've gone to the grocery store, I have chosen healthy foods. And on top of that, I have chosen meals because I like to food prep. And I don't always food prep because, especially before all this, I was just like, I'm not food prepping. And then I started food prepping because I used to do it when I was working out a lot. I would make one meal and then put off the other one and then sometimes let the meat go bad or whatever. And last week on Sunday, I think it was Sunday, or maybe the week before, I actually food prepped 2 meals on the same day, which I haven't done that in years. Years I haven't done that. Because the depression and anxiety and everything has caused me to really not care. And so I do feel I am on a healthy path. But yesterday has really derailed some of that. So I'm hoping that I can kind of knock myself out of it and get back to where I was feeling. And maybe that class on Monday will help. Anyway, so a structured exercise program, the only option? No. Some research shows that physical activity such as walking, not just formal exercise programs, may help mood improve. And that's true. I love walking with my dog. I did do a 5K last April. I walked it. My dog wasn't with me, but she trained with me. I say trained. We basically just walked. And so that was really great. I didn't do that same 5K this year because I just mentally wasn't prepared to go do the 5K. I haven't been doing any type of physical activity. So I didn't do that. But anyway, physical activity so you can work with your muscles requires energy, and exercise you can do repetitive body movement and so on and so forth. How do I get started? And I think this is the big thing. People have been telling me for years that exercise really helps with anxiety and depression. And I was like, I can't even get out of bed. You want me to go exercise? Are you crazy? That's not going to happen. It's starting to happen now, and I have been able to enjoy it. But it was certainly hard to start. And they always say the hardest thing to do is to take that first step. And now that I've done that, I absolutely am in love with Pilates. I love everything about it. He says, how do I get started and stay with it? Find what you enjoy, which Pilates now I love. Get your healthcare professional support, which I don't have, but it's not a bad idea to talk with them about what you're wanting to do. Because maybe you have some undiagnosed heart condition and it could cause a problem. Who knows? You just never know. But talk to your healthcare professional. Set reasonable goals. So one of the things with the therapy that I'm going through is exposure and trying to get out of the house and overcome that anxiety and agoraphobia. With my counselor, we set goals. And so I told her my goal is to do 3 Pilates classes a week. Walk my dog, which I will, because I walk my dog before the Pilates class. So I let her out and we walk together. Not long, but we walk. And then, so this time, the goal that we set for the next 2 weeks was to get to that garden that I was telling you about. So I need to decide what day I want to go, because I'm going to have to take off. I want to go on my day off because there's going to be less people there, and I plan on going in the morning. And the reason I do that is, if you've been listening, you know that even though I do not have social anxiety, or I've not been diagnosed with social anxiety, I do feel that I have it. So going during the week is definitely better for me to go than trying to fit it in over the weekend. So I will have to take off work in order to go. Anyway, set reasonable goals. Don't think of exercise or physical activity as a chore, which right now it doesn't, I don't think. Trying to embrace going on Monday, despite what happened yesterday. And think about what keeps me from being successful, which is just thinking about things and being overwhelmed and so on. But prepare for setbacks and obstacles. When I used to run, and I would try and run during the summer, holy smokes, and it was hot and humid and gross. It was awful to run. And so I remember one time I was training for a half marathon, and the training plan that I was on had me do 5 miles, which at the time wasn't a lot. And it was so freaking hot and humid that I could not run. I could not consistently run that 5 miles because it was so damn hot. And so it was certainly a setback for the training. And then what I ended up doing was, because of what program was on, I ran 3 days a week, and we'll just say Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that Monday I would run 4 miles. Wednesday I would run 2 to 3 miles. And then I would have a long run Friday or Saturday. And so say the Friday was my long run of 5 miles. What I ended up doing was I did the 5 mile runs back to back so I could do the 5 miles. And then I went on up to 6, 7, 8, and so on. And if possible, exercise in nature or green space, which totally agree with that. We've already talked about this, but that's why I felt just really great when I was in that park. And I'd like to go do that again and maybe recapture that feeling in a different park or garden that I mentioned that was really close. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed today's session today, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye. If today's episode of Real Stories, Real Struggles, and Real Hope resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps others find this space and feel less alone.